Hey, Kyan, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right, perfect. All right, guys, so I see the questions are coming in on the Slido link, and that's awesome. So if you guys see a question that you like or you think should be asked sooner or be in priority, make sure to like it because it jumps to the top of the list, and we're probably going to go in that order once the private session starts.
Well, and Rishi, I invited you to be one of the panelists. So love to have you on board here with us. Let's see. And let me know if you have any. Let's see if this works. Cool. So to those who aren't with the Beta Camp cohort, welcome to this webinar. My name is Kyan. I'm a sophomore at Wharton and one of the co-hosts here, and one of the alumni startup advisors here at Beta Camp. And I'm joined by Borna Stani, a sophomore at UBC Sauder, who's also will be the co-host and the alumni startup advisor at Beta Camp. So just waiting for Rishi here to join us. I just want to check if can everyone hear both me and Borna correctly? If you guys can hear as well. Great, wonderful.
Nice.
There it is.
There it is.
Perfect.
Nice.
Let me spotlight you. Cool. Hey, Rishi, can you hear me? How's it going?
Probably some technical issues.
Yeah. No worries at all. So I guess before we, let's see here.
Guys, so I see some questions coming in the Zoom Q&A. Could we please, whoever asked those questions, please paste them in the Slido link, just so we have all the questions in the same place. Thank you.
Cool. While we wait for Rishi to connect with us here, Beta Camp is really thrilled to provide lots of opportunities for students to learn across various different industry, various different verticals. And this summer we have lots of things to share. One of them is the Climate Action Bootcamp. So a huge thing in education today is how do we bring advocacy to action? So we have a really unique opportunity for students to get a hands-on experience through to learn how to adjust and approach climate change today. So there are 2-week sessions, and I'll send in the chat. There's an info session that you can sign up to if you're interested. I really recommend signing up for this. Perfect. And if you're just curious in any way, this is a great way for you to learn more. Perfect. And Rishi says he just found a room, so he'll be joining us in a bit. I'll quickly plug the next one. And then one thing that is probably I'm most excited for is the Investing Bootcamp. Again, another 2-week program for high school students who want to learn about both public and private markets, especially with this current downturn. There's so much to learn about sort of market dynamics and what it takes to sort of invest and hopefully learn to time the market. So I'll paste this in as well. I really wish I had this heading into university. Definitely would have put me ahead of the curve here, especially with sort of the investment seat at Wharton. And I'm sure it's the same at UBC if Borna would like to speak to that. Yeah. So I'll send a link into the chat right now.
I don't have host power. Could you bring
Yeah, give me
Rishi
one
into
second. I
attendance?
just realized this was sent to everyone. Boom. Climate action and investing. Cool. I just sent the links into the chat. So please do check these out. These are really cool opportunities. And if you're uncertain or you're on the fence, this is a uh, great way to learn more about investing in climate action. Cool. Perfect. Hello,
Good.
hello. How's it
Hello.
going?
It's going pretty good. There were no available conference rooms this WeWork, so yeah, just grabbed a
Yeah.
booth. It's good.
Well, it's great to have you. Glad you're able to find a space. I know here I was scrambling to find a room myself, but well, we're thrilled to have you. We'll introduce you, but I'm sure you don't need too much of an introduction. And I'll actually leave that to Borna in a bit. But basically, to everyone who just joined us here, how the structure of this will work, the first 30 minutes will be a public session, just so we can get to know Rishi a bit better, get to know Otto a bit better. And then the next 30 minutes will be a private session exclusively for the beta camp cohort. So to our students, check the announcements for the second link to that private Zoom. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Borna.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Kine. And Rishi, it's awesome to see you. And it's great to have you, man. Just a quick intro for all the participants. I was looking to meet Rishi during the first beta camp cohort, and I remember him as being the super technical code whiz guy of his own team as well. And it was great to hear about his ideas during the socials and different types of events we had. I was really surprised to find out that he was only 14 at the time, and as we're going to see, he's gotten very, very far in the past 2 years since that beta camp cohort. Aside from software engineering roles in the past, we're here today to focus on Otto, originally known as Pet Code, where Rishi is the chief technical officer and is one of the co-founders. Otto is Otto is a startup working to support pet parents by leveraging data and analytics straight from their pets themselves, with a mission to simplify pet parenthood in order to increase accessibility. They raised $1.6 million in their first pre-seed round, which we will learn more about in a little bit. And Rishi is the engineering lead for the startup, and we hope to have a great chat about his experience with that today. Rishi, take it away for a few more minutes if I miss anything.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously I was part of the very, very first beta camp cohort 0. I think since then there's been a couple more. We started Otto a couple months before beta camp in like May 2020, I think. We went on to raise $125,000 from OnDeck's very first venture cohort, which is called ODX. Before that, we were in the first cohort of Replit Ventures, which was exactly 1 year after beta camp. And that was super massive round. That was like $2,000. Then from ODX, we had a couple more follow-on investments from Joshua Browder, the CEO of Do Not Pay, bringing like our pre-seed round to 225,000. And then a couple of weeks ago, start of June, we raised our very first formal seed round, which was $1.6 million at about an $18 million valuation. And that was led by Ariel Zuckerberg at Long Journey Ventures.
All righty, that's awesome. So excited. I'm excited myself. I don't know about I don't know about the students, but I'm excited to learn more about how you guys got there. So we're going to go into a little bit more background questions. So could you give us just a brief background on your experience in building and programming?
Yeah, so I started at a pretty early age, totally by accident. I've been programming ever since I was 8. It all happened like, yeah, totally on like a fluke chance. I was over at the family friend's house and I was super bored, young kid. And so I started wandering the house, and in this one room upstairs, all the lights were turned off, but there was this one guy in front of a computer with super colorful, lights on the screen. And so I went up to him. As it turns out, he was finishing up his final year at a Dropbox internship at University of Waterloo. And so that day I set up my very first website, and from there it's kind of just been like a snowball effect. When I was in grade 5, I think that was the first time I ever got into like app development. Grade 6, I got banned from GitHub for creating too many repositories and being underage. And then in grade 8, I went to my very first hackathon when I was 12, I think. And that was Hack the North at Waterloo. So everything kind of came full circle. I think ever since then, I've contributed to like thousands of open source repos. I've maybe had like 19,000 commits on GitHub. So yeah, like I think programming is a really, really big part of my personality now. Yeah, it really is, it's how I came to be, in this position and I guess in this city.
Wow, already, that's awesome. Definitely a unique story. I haven't heard one like that. Let's shift a little bit over to Otto since that's kind of our main focus for today. Could you just walk us through a little bit about how the idea for Otto came about? I know the idea stemmed from kind of increasing pet time during the pandemic, and since everybody was staying at home, but how did this specific idea come about and kind of what were the iterations on it as you guys went forward?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So any startup, the reason that most startups are successful is because it solves, some problem that people don't actually know that they have. Like to give you guys a quick example, Google and Alta Vista back in the 90s. Alta Vista was this really old search engine. It could return searches to you in like a minute or so. And so it was primarily used by researchers. And then Google came along and created this whole new problem space. They were able to return searches to you in 5 seconds or less, combing through tens of millions of websites in like literally the blink of an eye. And so from there, they were able to basically create this new industry. With the search, they opened up the internet to as many consumers as possible. They became the internet company. And so that's kind of what we're aiming to achieve with Otto. What started off as kind of just, pun not intended, a pet project, right after this hackathon in May 2020, we decided, the first problem we really wanted to focus on was super simple. Dog tags are really, really difficult to create and they're difficult to update. So what we did was we created this tiny little QR tag. We have like a retailer in China that manufactures them and sends them over to us. And on there, you can store as many pieces of information you want, from vaccinations to your vet history, prior medical conditions, whatever. It was basically all that we ever wanted, in a tag. And so for the first couple of months, we kind of iterated on from there by adding in a bunch of different features that, early stage dog owners, we thought that they would like. So, we started off with vaccinations, contact information, then we went on to, more pet information, and then I believe lost pet info. So if you scanned it, it would notify every shelter, every dog owner, and every, fire station in a 5-mile radius. And then from there, things got a little bit more interesting. We got, featured on Forbes, a couple more, articles came through, but we weren't actually growing that much. Only until, we raised our very first round from ODX at the end of last year. So about one year into the startup, did we realize that we needed to make our first major pivot. And so like, that's what we're going to be delving into like right after this. But what Otto is trying to be right now is the all-in-one pet wellness system. This will happen with nearly every single startup where you try to focus in on one very, very specific problem, but you misjudge exactly how important that problem is. In tech, generally, you have, startup spaces that can be measured on 2 axes. You have the breadth of the problem and you have the depth of it. If you go and work on Facebook, you might be solving problems for billions of users at a time. Every single push you make is going to impact, an incredible amount of people. But nobody's life is ever going to be changed by Facebook, or if it is, it's going to be changed at a very surface level. If you remove Facebook from most people's lives, nothing will happen. The reason that Otto is so interesting to work for and to work on is because it allows you to create this kind of product that's high on both ends of these spectrums. If you create some product that is able to, effectively retain users at the earliest stage, if you can create something that early stage dog owners really, really love, you've then created a company that will stay with them for the rest of their dog's life, and for whatever other dogs they might have. This is like, we're working at the very, very edge of both depth and breadth. We're creating products that, people have emotional attractions to and that millions of people across the world can use every single day. And so what Otto's starting to pivot to, like I said before, is this kind of all-in-one wellness team. Usually it takes up to a year and a half for any, new early stage dog owner to get fully, fully used to owning their dog. But with Otto, we're trying to reduce that to less than 2 weeks. The way that we're doing that is by partnering with shelters, getting all all pieces of information from from any dog, and using machine learning to kind of adapt to new and early stage users' habits. We can notify you, whenever you have a new kind of requirement come up, if you have vaccinations, if you need training. And because we have your location, we can literally tell you about services that are local to you. And so in reality, we thought that the tag was the big moat for us. But now we believe it's the app. And that's the thing that we're trying to focus on for the next couple of months.
Alrighty. Yeah. So I think that was a really good analogy of the kind of the width and breadth of a startup and how uniquely Otto is positioned. And also a great point that you brought up at the beginning, where a lot of the problems that we have are ones that we've kind of learned to deal with and that we don't recognize can be improved in the case of Google, which that was. And so Otto similarly. I want to shift a little bit towards your experience at BetaCamp 2 years ago. So reaching back to 2 summers ago, your startup idea was Herd Social, a community building platform for design sprints and kind of building that community. Could you tell us a little bit more about that venture and how you guys reached that idea during that period?
Oh man, that was a long time ago. Yeah, that brings back memories. So Herd Social, in essence, it came out of this idea for like co-working. The only way that you you really feel motivated to work is if you have others around you. It's the reason that I'm at a WeWork right now. I can't work from home because there's nobody around me to motivate me. And so with Herd Social, this was at like the very beginning of the pandemic. Yeah, this is at the very beginning of the pandemic. And so everybody was, at home. They couldn't do any work. Nobody was motivated. So we decided to create these things called pods. We would put as many people as possible, or honestly, whoever wanted to join, into these little clusters. They could pay us a subscription, and they would give us, they would just interact with each other. They would help each other stay motivated, work on their own projects. And then with that money, we could offer up incentives, for the people that did complete their tasks. Herd Social also has some interesting analogs to Otto. I think a couple of the really successful businesses rely on distribution through other means. With Herd, the way that we meant to gain traction is by reaching out to other businesses, people that already had tons of employees that were working from home and that needed motivation. With Otto, the way that we're getting customers is by reaching out to shelters and getting all of their early stage pet owners. So just a little interesting business tip there. If you're creating some kind of early stage startup, try to figure out who else has solved this problem before you in some way, who has target customers, that would really fit your product. Don't go and try to find those customers directly. Go and reach out to the business that owns those customers, and then you'll probably have more success that way. It's easier to convince one person than it is to convince 50 million.
All righty, very, very good. Thanks, Rishi. I'm sure a few of the guys got that written down from the students. And so kind of building off Herd Social, what would you say were some of your key takeaways from that summer at BetaCamp and building this startup?
I think the one thing that I took away was that you never know what you don't know. In startups in particular, I think it's really easy to kind of overthink and have like this one massive business plan, think of everything in theory, but you never actually know anything until you go out and try it. For Herd Social, I remember we had, like 5 different presentations all lined up. We thought that, at the end of summer, we'd go out and we'd raise a little bit. But in reality, what actually happened was we got 15 signups and then the company died in, a couple of weeks, which isn't a bad thing by any means. It just means that, there were some issues with it. In startups, it's really easy to kind of fake yourself into believing that, you have metrics that, prove success. If any of you, come out to San Francisco or New York or any other tech hub, you'll find people boasting about massive rounds, 2.7 million, 5 million seed rounds. Just a couple of months ago, there was this company called MoonPay that raised 500 million in their second round of fundraising. In reality, those are what are known as vanity metrics. If you guys are in BetaCamp for, a couple of weeks, you'll probably hear that term thrown around a lot. So vanity metrics are, in essence, like numbers that have no real purpose, but that make you feel good. Your follower count on Instagram, for instance. That doesn't mean anything about the number of friends you have, just the amount of people that are following you. And a very similar thing happens in startups where you can feel like you're super accomplished. You have a lot of things going for your company. You might have tons of money in the bank, but in reality, your product might be failing. And the same thing goes in the other direction. You might be incredibly pessimistic about how your product is functioning, but in reality, it might be a really, really good business. And so that very first summer at BetaCamp taught me that counterintuitively, apathy is the most important thing in startups. You should never really see anything as being, incredible, but you should also never see anything as, just being like insignificant or, insubstantial. Everything in startups matters. Everything you do, you have to do with purpose, because at some point you're going to have, you're going to have a massive time crunch. You're going to be managing 50 employees. You're going to have dozens of partners around the world. You can't possibly manage all of that at the exact same time. You have to figure out how to allocate your emotions in the most effective way possible. And so yeah, I think like beta was the beginning of that larger realization for me.
That's really, really wonderful. And I guess that'll lead into like sort of a question I have for you regarding sort of, I guess, personal strategy, but also company strategy. So recently, with inflation running rampant in the US and going upwards of 8% every annual report every month, and with this recent increase in interest rates by the Fed, we're seeing a significant reduction in liquidity. So there's less money essentially for investors to have on hand. And something that I've noticed and in my readings is that people are shifting their investment thesis and their focus away from just revenue growth to more profitability, sort of safer side, extending their runway, lowering their burn multiple to sort of sit out this sort of tumultuous time. I guess like what's next for Otto during these times, and love to hear your insight on sort of how you guys have been navigating these times.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And for anybody that doesn't know what a burn multiple, I guess we have it on the slide. But yeah, a burn multiple is essentially just how efficiently can you use your capital. Your burn rate is just the amount of money that you spend per some given time frame, and then the amount of money that you make, your recurring revenue, that could be monthly or annually, whatever you want. If you divide the amount of money that you're spending by the amount of money that you're gaining, that gives you your burn multiple. In past years, a lot of investment, and I'll kind of split that question up into two parts. One, what is Otto doing? And then one, what are my thoughts about the market? In past years, you have had VCs and angels that have invested basically on nothing except for, margins. I was actually talking to one of our investors, Sean Zhu, the other day. Great guy. If any of you, want an intro, I'm happy to connect. But in essence, investments have really gone from, okay, here's a new product that's interesting. It seems to have not so great numbers, but it's in a market that I'm interested in learning about. And so, you would go and invest. That was what 2021 was like. You've seen massive crypto investments, expenditures of more than like $1.4 billion in one single trade. And so it's kind of gone from that to being far more conservative with your capital. And I'm talking about like firms across the table here. Sequoia has had like massive decreases in deal flow. Sequoia is like one of the largest venture partners in the world. And they're kind of like the big kahuna of VC investing out there right now. So it's kind of gone from that over to, okay, these numbers look really rock solid, but it's in a business that I don't really understand. It's not something that I can, really allocate that much time towards. And so I'm not going to do it. In investing, there are two different metrics that you really have to observe. The first is your ROI, what's the possible return on investment. The second one that's really hidden and that most people don't really understand until, years into their startup journey is time expenditure. The best investors out there will, allocate specific days or specific, parts of their week to help you out on specific journeys. If you have very specific problems in your startup, you can always reach out to your investors. Your investors should be some of the closest people to you as a founder. They shouldn't be out there in the world just doing their own thing, and then you call them in, once every month for an update. how VCs talk about their time expenditure when it comes, or like within the context of your company, is extremely, extremely important. You know, all of our investors are incredibly active, you know, when it comes to Otto. They, you know, they text us almost constantly. I'm actually getting notifications on my phone right now. And so that's probably the most important thing that most people don't like, they don't immediately grasp. When you're investing, it's not just about, you know, your profit to equity ratio. It's not just about how much you raise or evaluation. Those are actually pretty meaningless metrics. It's about the people that you're building this with. And one other thing, over the next couple months, if any of you decide to start, you know, decide to create any startups, you go out there and you find, seed partners, or anybody that, wants to invest. More likely than not, you will find yourself in an uncapped safe situation. And so I think this was one of the other questions that we had on the list. But right now, in this market, you might not actually have to decide what valuation your startup raises at. You don't need to decide, how much equity you give away. Yeah, that's a conversation for another time, though. Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts about the market. To answer your second question, Otto raised at the exact point in time when the market, took a massive downturn. For anybody that's in crypto, this, like, the crash of this one coin called Luna, kind of like toppled the entire VC market. It started off in crypto and then kind of bled out into like all adjacent firms. And so Otto raised in mid-April, and then we did all of our announcements, super early June. And so when our checks hit the bank, the entire market just collapsed. And luckily, we raised pretty, on pretty strong offers. And so nobody retracted, nobody took their funds away. Yeah, Luna was down 99. That was not fun. But yeah, no, so Otto's actually been, thriving in this market. It means that, with VC investment being down quite a bit, it means that talent, or really, really good talent, right? Like great engineers, great designers, great growth people, they're all just flooded onto the market. And so, we're able to get really great advice from really amazing people. I think our business model is, it's fairly sound. We've been testing it out with hundreds of dog owners across, or, over the past few weeks. We've had, visits to shelters pretty much every single week from the start of April. And so, I think Otto's business is like kind of as rock solid as it could be. And now, it's time to just go heads down, full build mode. And so we'll probably resurface in the next couple months with another big announcement about, some next milestone. And then hopefully for us, that means another fundraising round, probably closer towards the end of the year.
That's great to hear, and we'll be definitely watching out for that beta camp. And I guess just wanted to summarize here, and I guess bring back that it took you a while to actually get any funding in the first place. It was a lot of hard work that was necessary. You were light on your toes and had to pivot in order to build something different, I guess. And that really brings back to what you said earlier that I really liked, is you don't know until you try. And I'm curious, what piece of advice do you have for our beta campers, or I guess the general audience here, about sort of how to navigate these times, how to explore things while at the same time being cognizant of the risks involved? Yeah.
That's a really good question. And I think finding what makes a really, really good MVP isn't something that you can, learn from a textbook. It takes, it takes like months or years of experience. That's not to say that you can't, create an MVP like right now, but it's going to take a lot of time before you reach, some end product that you believe actually has, some value in building. I think the most important thing to do right now is actually not to, build anything. Take the time out, even if it feels incredibly stupid, to get to know, your market, get to know exactly how people think when they're going to be approaching something to do with your problem. And actually, I think the question is a little bit strange, because in startups, you should never, ever, ever fall in love or focus on an idea. You should fall in love with a problem. With Otto, the reason that, we're like at this stage right now, is because every single one of us loves building in the pet market. It's an incredibly emotion-filled industry. If we, kept the tag model, I don't even think we would have reached our pre-seed, much less like a lead from Long Journey Ventures. And so when you guys are, trying to think about your MVP or whatever product you're trying to build, make sure you take the time out. That can be a week, that can be a month, however long you need, to really understand and get into the minds of your target market. Who is the type of person that's going to be using this? And I also advise you to not think too much about demographics. Think about, kind of like the splits in thinking between separate groups of people. For us, that might include, how people that are dealing with new puppies, as opposed to people dealing with old dogs, might think. They're going to have extremely separate plans, when it comes to notifications, when it comes to services. When you think about the markets that your product is going to be serving, think about that. Think about, what are these people going through in their lives that, cause them to reach out and use some kind of product like this? What types, what kinds of thinking are they doing? And how can I grab onto that? A really, really good design, there's a really great design and psychology, website that I'll send in, like in the chat a little bit later on once we take a break. Basically, it goes through every single possible fallacy that you can have as a startup founder, and allows you to think really clearly about user experience. I don't think it's worth it to, go into the nitty gritty about, what kinds of markets you're going to be serving. If you segment people into like geographic or socioeconomic policies, if that influences the way that they think, then go for it. But my point is, you should never, ever, ever start thinking about building out a fully fledged product until you've taken the time out to really understand the way that your target market thinks, and really understand exactly how your MVP is going to work. And remember, creating your MVP should be the matter of maybe a week. It should be something that's super inexpensive. If you build it and it craps out, you should not feel bad, about throwing the whole thing away. It shouldn't take too much time. It shouldn't take too much money. It shouldn't be something that you can emotionally hang on to, because at their core, what startups are experiments. You're an experiment on the way to becoming a real company. And until then, you should treat it just like that. You should try to be as inexpensive as possible.
That is wonderful. Wow. And we're actually looking at that next week, sort of hypothesis testing, MVP building. And again, this goes back to what you said, like failure is nothing to be scared of. It's just another data point. So you don't know until you try, and it's just something that didn't work. So thank you so much. We're going to close this open session really shortly here. Just a reminder to all our guests here, sign up for our info sessions for climate action and for the investing bootcamp this summer. Really, really great opportunities to sort of learn more about the industry and sort of both lens. Again, thank you so much, Rishi. And to all our beta campers, we're going to head over to the private Zoom now to have our closer session with Rishi. So we'll see everyone there.